Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. For the people that are watching live right now and for the people that are going to be watching on the replay, do you remember like what the first steps were that you kind of took towards that thought process that you're talking about, towards really bettering and evolving to what you mentally were visualizing for yourself? Do you remember?
I don't know that I do because it came after to say that I went through that well, it came out well on the other side, but in the beginning, It was a very dark period. And it took until a few years later, looking back, to realize just how deep in that pit I was. But there was just a moment where I had a group of friends that, supported me, and I'm very grateful for, and a community, and a church family. And at some point, the fake it till you make it, I just kept and thought, I have these kids, and I have this family, and I just need to keep going. And so I was waking up and just doing it, but not really knowing what I was doing. And at some point, I just hit that point where I had to just crumble and feel all of it and realize that, I'm not okay, but I need to find a way to be okay.
Yeah.
And that was hard. But then, at the time, that was awful. I felt like being numb was better. Mm-hmm. But looking back at all that time when I was just numb and don't even remember, that was really harder.
Yeah. Do you remember if you had any mentors or any books or anything that you were kind of diving into to figure all that out? Or friends, family? I know you mentioned church.
Yes. I was in a Bible study, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was by Beth Moore. But the whole premise of it was like breaking free of these chains. And, again, it was one of those things that I was going through, and that Bible study is where my closest friends were. And it was like my dose of sanity every week. Awesome. I'd go there, and they had childcare, and the girls that were in there just loved on me. And so we'd have fancy coffee and talk about the Bible. And there was just this moment when I, it just clicked, and something in it just spoke to me that it was like, this is where I am. Like, I have to actually admit that I'm down in this pit. And I've always prided myself on being a problem solver, and getting through things, and I'm not getting through it. Like, maybe on the outside it looked like I'm getting through it, but I'm not solving problems and I'm not getting through it. I'm sinking deeper, and nobody realizes how deep I am.
Yeah.
So I would say that I really can't pin it. There was so much going on. But I think that was one of those pivotal things that planted the seed, at least.
Yeah. 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 And the fact that you're mentioning community is great, because I think a lot of times when we are at least for me, when I'm going through stuff like that, I tend to isolate, and kind of want to keep to yourself and not talk to anybody, not share anything. And it's not that you have to share all this stuff, but just being in and amongst, a community who's similar to what you're doing or where you're trying to get helps a lot. So finding something that's, your niche or something that you appreciate, and kind of throwing yourself into that community is helpful. Even if it's, not biblical, it could be knitting. It could be, sewing community, or a book. What is that? Like a book?
Book club?
A book club. I was thinking of Oprah. I'm like, what does she call it? A book club. And I've been a fan of those. I was doing mystery book clubs
Mm-hmm.
years ago in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. And that was kind of a way for me to kind of escape,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit and fall into like a fantasy
Yes.
type of arena with other people who appreciated that. And I found a few close friends in that mix. So I think that that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
What's the number one lesson you've learned about life?
Not that it's, a lot of people say it's too short. It's not that it's too short, it's that we waste it. um, we're all of us are given a certain amount of days and we have no idea how many of those days are. And we can't waste that time worrying like when that day will be. We need to just make the most of this day. And there was a 3-year point in my life where I wrote like 5 eulogies for people that were very, very close to me, my parents, my grandparents.
Wow.
And I realized in doing that, it was a hard thing, but it was kind of cathartic to go through there and walk through everything. It was like because I'm a writer, that was how I processed my grief. But I thought like when it's me, like when I'm gone, what will people say about me? And that's something that I think of a lot. Like, what will my children remember about the life that I built for them? What will my clients say about the experience that they had? And it's not even so much that like a death, but like they move on, right? Like they finish and they finish the coaching program, or we finish the project, then they move on. And so it's not that I've cut them out of my life, but they're not in. So what will they say? What is that legacy that I'm leaving? And the legacy is never, the boxes that you check off or the calls that you have, or even how much is in your bank account. That's not the legacy. The legacy is that impact that you built.
Yeah.
And just thinking about how it's the little things that you remember. It's not the big, like we always, especially with kids, you think of like, I want to do these big things, right?
Mhm.
Or my business, I want to do these big things. And those are great, but that's not what people really, that's not what they grieve. That's not what they remember, what has an impact. It's all those little things. It's how you show up for them. It's that, like that personal branding, really, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. Like that is what we need to strive for more than, and I have big goals, but the big goals are great for today. But really, if you're looking at that legacy impact, it's those little things that you do that don't even show up on your goal sheet that make that difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love that you're talking about your children, and I'm in the community that this community, it was originally built on narcissistic abuse, and a lot of the females that were in and amongst the group were single moms,
Mm-hmm.
either separated or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
and low on money. And one of the biggest things that I said was, it's not about all that big stuff or spending loads of money. It's about
Mm-hmm.
exactly, just showing up. Do you have any examples of things you've done for your kids that are little that they appreciate? Like reading before
Um,
bed, or what are some things you do?
I think that we've established some traditions that are important to them. Like every Valentine's Day, we have a tea party. My husband and I both love tea, and I love like fancy china and like, doing things up. And so every Valentine's Day we break out, and I use my china a lot, I have to admit, because I just like to use it. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like if it breaks, it breaks. I'm careful with it, but we break that out and we have this tea party, and like the teens kind of grown, especially the boys, but it's something that we do every year. And we sit down, and there have been years when, like you said, like there was no money, and it was just like, let's find out what's in the cupboard and, scrape some coins together and go to the Dollar Tree and get some cookies. But it's more the experience, because there have been years that I've had a lot of money and did a very lavish thing. And there have been years that it was just like a couple of cookies and I made some special tea and baked a cake. And they don't necessarily realize, when you talk about it with them, they don't remember that. They don't remember if I had, 5 different dishes or I had 3 different dishes. It's really the experience of being together. And even though they complain, it's that, those little moments that they remember, growing up. And so we've always, tried to keep things like that going, things that we always do, even when there really wasn't money. I mean, there was one Christmas where I had $10 for 4 kids to buy everything. And I bartered, and I what was that called? Free cycled stuff. And we stuffed there was a discount store that sold, I think it was like 3 bags of chips for $1 or something like that. And we got chips and stuffed their stockings and whatever. And they didn't notice at all. Like, I felt horrible that I had, had $10 for Christmas, but for them, they just had a great time. I invested a lot of time and energy in trying to find things I thought they would like.
Yeah.
But I think we think that they realize things more than they do. It's
Yeah.
really that they woke up and there were presents under the tree, and we sat and opened them, and we had our breakfast, and the breakfast wasn't as elaborate, but I still had, that's when I break out my china too. Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, when they go to sleep, I decorate the kitchen and put out all the china and, do it up. And it didn't matter that we just had like frozen waffles and scrambled eggs. They were just excited,
Yeah.
So I think that there's always a way to do it. It just might not look the way you want it to.
Yeah. And a lot of that's internalized, right? It's like
Yes.
we're projecting our thoughts onto them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they don't even have an expectation.
No. And it's interesting to hear their versions of things that happened,
I agree. Yeah. I only have one, so I
Mhm.
get one thought process. But
Yeah.
we go back and reminisce about things.
Mhm.
I actually opted to not celebrate the holidays.
Mhm.
So my son, we've never celebrated Christmas or birthdays or anything.
Mhm.
And, I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness, so it
Mhm.
stems from that. But once I left, I was able to make a decision, and finances were just so low
Mhm.
that I was like, you know what? I don't even want to get involved with all of this.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's the same, he doesn't even know. He doesn't even get it. Now he
Mhm.
might turn around when he's 32 years old and have serious trauma because of it. But as it is right now, he's 17 and he
Yeah.
does. I ask him every once in a while, and he's like, "I don't care," but he has everything that he wants.
Mhm.
He,
Yeah.
he gets stuff, and I think that that's important. I love I love when I talk to mothers who are open to doing things just slightly different, doing things slightly different and going with the flow and appreciating where they are in their life and just making it work
Mhm. Yes.
versus having complete meltdowns.
Yes.
But sometimes we have to have those too.